to another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me as always is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
Doing very well, Jody. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm feeling like Tony the Tiger. Whee!
Was that what that was? It sounded a little bit more like Fat Albert.
I don't know.
In the same ballpark general area.
Yeah,
there.
somewhere over there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Cool. A couple of episodes ago, we talked about DIing stuff.
Yes, we did.
And we both recommended that if you're dealing with synths, you generally tend to DI those and no headaches really doing that. But there are some cases where you might not want to do that. So that's kind of on the agenda today.
Yes.
Right. So first of all, I think we both know your choice, what you would like to do. So I think I know what you're going to say. Given the choices, what's your first thing? What do you prefer to do if you got a keyboard?
My preferred method, more often than not, is going to be to just DI the thing. Right. However, there are times when it is fun to actually plug that thing into an amplifier and mic that thing up in some arcane, weird way to change the color of the sound in the analog version of our world.
Sure. Absolutely agree. Now, I think the first question that we need to ask ourselves, whatever situation that we're in, is what kind of like synth or keyboard are we talking about here? Like what are we dealing with? Because they're different types, obviously, but
the case can be made that definitions of things are getting blurred way beyond recognition at this point. In terms of the fact that you and I, normally when you think of synth or keyboard, we're going to think of the hardware version of what existed. And now a lot of guys will think of the software plug-in form of things that happen.
Sure. And why all that makes it infinitely easier with all the emulations and stuff. If we're talking about the hardware world here, you know, I'm thinking, and I'm still painting with pretty damn broad strokes here, I'm thinking about the family of sort of like electric pianos.
Yes.
And to me, that's like a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer, or I'm going to even lump like a Hammond into that kind of category.
Yeah, well, that's all hardware-based stuff.
Right. All of these had purpose-built cabinets for that. So that was the general way that you would obviously play and record these, right? Mm-hmm. You can still DI them, not in case of a Hammond necessarily, but the Rhodes and stuff, you could do that. But there are cabinets out there, and if you have them with these pieces, by all means use them.
Why wouldn't you?
Exactly. Because chances are, to me as well, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, the player that is performing on them is probably used to performing in that way. Mm-hmm. So it's only good ideas. And of course, there's for like a Hammond, I tend to think about a Leslie cabinet.
Sure.
Right, where we got that. Let's say that somebody gets a Rhodes and they pick it up, but there's no cabinets or anything and they don't have. What would you recommend doing this? Say if you want to go that route, I don't want to do any kind of like a DI out of it. What can I do?
I would consider a guitar amp, something that's probably on the cleaner side. In that regard, in terms of like having a clean guitar amp to run a keyboard through, my first thought that I tend to have is the Roland Jazz Chorus 120. And the odd thing about that is it was not actually designed for keyboards, but back in the day, it was a very popular amp for keyboards to run through because it sounded amazing.
Yeah, and I think part of that is probably because it is such a clean sounding amp, right? So you get air quotes here, but more like the natural sound and not as colored out of the keyboard, right? So great choice there. It doesn't mean that it has to be a Roland Jazz Chorus, but I'm with you there. I would probably lean on something a little bit cleaner, like maybe just a Fender thing or whatever, but any kind of clean guitar amp would probably work. And of course, when we're doing this, we have to consider why we're actually miking it up. Are we going for like more of a pure tone and going that route? So clean is good.
Well, on the flip side, there are infamous keyboard players from the past who have plugged into things such as Marshall amps. And that gets you a much grittier tone, of course, because Marshall is known for their distortion more than their clean.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking primary examples here like John Lord or somebody from John Lord from Deep Purple and just kind of really getting that really gritty sound. And on a lot of those Deep Purple records, if you didn't know and you're just listening to them, you'd be hard pressed to say that, oh, that's a keyboard, right? And it almost sounds like two guitars, right? But that's something. And if you really want to go, obviously, experimental route and just really mangle stuff, go with something really esoteric and see what you come up with, right? And you might get something really cool, or you might get something that leads you down a one-way street, as it were.
Well, and that's the point of experimentation when you are creating musical masterpieces, right?
In the perfect world.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So how often have you actually done this? Have you gone through and like mic'd up keyboards and things?
It was a lot more often in the past than it is now.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I don't do it as much now, just thanks to all the emulations that we have. But if something strikes my fancy, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for me.
I'm with you there because it's also one of those, how much time do you have?
That's
right?
a big factor too for a lot of things these days.
Right. So it's like, do you have time to experiment? And are you willing to experiment? Because obviously this comes down to the artist too, right? What they want to do and what they're comfortable with. And it's like, no, this is the sound I want. I want you to DI it. We're going in and no muss, no fuss, right? But
sure.
This is something that I could see, and I don't know this firsthand, but somebody like Eric Valentine would probably go absolutely nuts with this kind of stuff and come up with some really creative solutions.
Of course he would. Why wouldn't he? He's Eric Valentine.
Right. We're going to put a U87 down the hallway, and we're going to put this lipstick mic that I have, and we're going to stick that in the back of the cabinet. But yeah, so it's a lot of creativity that we can have there, obviously. What if we're not dealing with one of these electric pianos? We're dealing with more of a standard synth, shall we say. So whether this is like a Prophet or a Moog or a modern thing like a Nord stage piano or whatever.
I would almost treat it the same way. I would consider the situation that is at hand. Obviously, we tend to think about things in terms of recording in a studio. But it'd be the same if you're running live and you want to hear it a certain way. Maybe you plug that thing into an amp, or maybe you're just going straight into the console for a PA type thing.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the live thing, right? Where perhaps most of us that sit and deal with recording and stuff, we don't necessarily think about that part of the process, right? But when a keyboard player is on stage, he usually has like maybe his own little mixer where he can control his rack of synths that he's got to do that, and then in some kind of amp, and then PA, obviously. That signal path is kind of all built in there, but I would go the same route. It could be either you're just going and you're literally miking up a small PA to kind of get that different sound of those synths, right? If you're not DIing, of course,
sure.
Right? Here again, I would go guitar amp if that's another option.
Oh,
right?
how about an SVT 810?
Okay.
That might get you some pretty good bottom end along with some nice top end on that.
It could be, or it could get like really, really woolly, perhaps. I don't know. I'd have to try that at some point. The same thing goes here, right? And if you're, depending on what the outcome is, if it's pure experimentation, just go nuts. What is that organ patch going to sound like going through a Soldano SLO 100? You might come up with something really, really cool and genre bending here. Now, I would say, just as an aside to this, to me, this is something where I would really, really consider what kind of part it is that the keyboard part is.
Right.
Let's say if you're doing something obviously on the cleaner side and you have these beautiful swelling pads that you're dealing with, maybe miking that up through a Marshall is not going to be your best choice because you're imparting so much color.
That could be
with the amp, right? So, but then again, maybe you come up with a new genre where it's now garage trance metal, something. I don't know.
Angel Screamo.
Yeah, there you go. Something like that. I would say guitar amps are a good choice if we're miking it up as a PA. That's another choice, right? how would you go about actually miking these then? What about choices as far as like mics and stuff? What would you consider?
I'd probably treat it a lot like the cross between a guitar and a piano, like an actual grand style piano. And
Explain yourself.
well, grand pianos, you're usually miking things in various ways, whether you're going to be inside or lifting the lid and inside, or semi-open and inside, and then maybe a room mic or two as well, where you're miking the strings and the hammers, generally speaking, to get the tone of what's coming out of a piano. And the mics that you might generally tend to use on something like that, like a 261 or something of that nature, or a KM84, something that has a good broad range but is kind of pencil-like, might be an initial choice that I'm going to point at a guitar cabinet if I'm miking it through a cabinet. If I'm going for the grit, I would probably consider throwing an SM57 or a 421 on there for that type of thing. And if I'm going more for the clean, I might think more of a Royer 121 or some type of ribbon style mic that is better on a cleaner type sound.
Interesting. Yeah. To me, this is almost one of those where you can kind of say the joke, right? Well, how do you mic something like this? Where it's like, well, you get a mic and you point it toward the source, right?
Yeah, there's always that.
Right. All that sarcasm aside, I would probably go for a 57 or a 421 as well, just like you mentioned, right? Now, let's say it's this where we're kind of miking up a PA, right? So we might want to get a little bit more of a room sound to it. So it sounds like a little bit bigger, perhaps. Then I might consider going with something more of a condenser type of thing, dependent on, obviously, how close to the source we want it to be. If we want it to be more up close, I'm with you. I'm going like 57 or 421. Now, this is a little bit more to me on like if we're miking up a guitar amp, right?
Sure.
This, obviously, we're not going to go into a step-by-step here of how to mic up a Leslie cab that you might have with your Hammond, right? That would be a different podcast. I would think as far as like positioning the mics, if I'm going for something close up, I'm with you. I would go straight as like I would do with when I'm miking a guitar cab. And for me, the starting point is always like I try to be right between like the cap and the cone.
Cone edge, cap edge? Are you talking cap edge?
Yeah, I'm talking right like from the center of the speaker up until it gets to the cone, right? So right in that position. That's always my starting point.
Okay.
Because I'm hearing a nice blend. It's not like too fizzy of being like right up against the center, a little bit more offset. And that's always my starting point. And then, of course, it's just you have to place it where it sounds good.
Well, you're thinking 3 inches out for a start, 4 inches out, so you're not getting too much of a proximity effect on it. And for those that don't know, proximity effect is when you get way to the mic, close to the mic, and suddenly you're very deep in the voice or deep in whatever it is you got, accentuated things. The idea being that you want it to be relatively round or broad spectrum. You're going, what, 3-4 inches out?
Maybe. I might start closer, though, actually. I might start, because when I do a guitar cab, I try to be like maybe an inch off the grill, right? Because there's still a little bit of distance off to the actual speaker.
Right.
Something there, and then see what that does.
Yeah.
And it's like, is that what I want it to be? If it's just odd sounding, move the damn mic around. And you might even go like off axis, right? If it's too fizzy or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's no rule to that, but that is sort of like always my go-to where I start anyway, and then see what we want. And of course, it'll be a different thing if we don't want that up close sound, then I will back off, but then I'll have to make that creative decision first. It's like, do I want it more up close, or do I want more of the sound of the keyboard filling the room, if you will?
Right.
And of course, the last part of that would be like if you're thinking about how you're doing drums, maybe do 2 signals, right? So you got one in the room and you got the close up as well. So no rules to that, but that's how I would start.
I hear you, and I don't disagree with it. Beyond the actual few steps that we're giving for the recording of all of this sound coming from a keyboard or electric piano or synth, why else would you do this in a studio situation by plugging it into an amp and letting it bleed out into the room?
Well, I kind of alluded to it at the top of the podcast here. The first thing for me would be to sort of accommodate the player, what they are used to or how they are used to performing. If they're used to playing with it, filling the room through an amp and not coming through a PA or whatever, then I would want to make them comfortable and go that route. And chances are, if they have a favorite way that they like to do things, I'm going to listen to them, because chances are I'm going to learn something about how it's going to sound the best, right? It's all about accommodating the player, getting them to be comfortable.
Right.
And, if they get the vibe or the feel of that sound in the room, chances are they're going to make a better performance. So that would be my first thing that I would go to. What about you, though?
I agree with it. And I would do it for the same exact reason. Interestingly enough, as you're sitting here talking about that, I'm thinking about a live situation in my mind that I've had more than one occasion to be on stage at Cantor's Kibitz Room with Rami Jaffe, who is a phenomenal keyboard player who's played with tons of high-level bands, I guess you could say famous bands. And he would come in early on nights that they were playing and get the keyboard stuff set up so that it would just destroy the room, so to speak, because the Kibitz Room was not very big, but his keyboard sound would be gigantic.
Right. Yeah, because it is a sound thing as well, obviously, right? If you know that this is the sound that we want on the recording, then this is how we're going to achieve that, right? You said also at the top here where there are so many fantastic emulations and things.
Yes.
Right? It's very, very easy to just do it in virtual instrument form. Again, here, the player might not feel that, it doesn't feel right when I'm playing it through the virtual instrument or the emulation. So, we have to consider that just to get the thing. Now, to me, the simplicity of a virtual instrument and the ease and the control of all those things is always my go-to in the exceptions that we just mentioned, right?
It makes it easy to do all of that and then keep a cap on everything from getting out of control. I don't disagree with it. It comes down to the mentality of the player and their comfort level of how they play and what they need to get that killer vibe to be playing. And we've said the same thing in numerous episodes about guitar players who are afraid to play with emulations as well because they don't feel the same way when they're playing. We've stepped well beyond that, I think, now with the emulations in today's world. It falls into the same concept for keyboard players that are used to playing with loud amplification, blasting people's heads off as they play, and including their own.
Yeah, there is a validity to that. I think if we're talking about, now we're doing some cross-pollination here, we're talking guitars and stuff as well, the feel of the performer, I think the sound argument goes away. Like to me, it's like, the emulations that we have sound amazing, but it is how the player feels while they're performing. And obviously that really, really matters. Same thing here. Now, the last part I would say when it comes to this, why you would want to go through this route is just pure experimentation as well.
Creativity.
Right. Yeah. And see, let's see what we can fuck up here. What can we do? What's going to sound awesome, right? And break some rules and see what's happening. You might come up with something that just sounds really, really unique because everybody has the same emulations these days. I would argue that most people get lazy and don't go beyond presets and stuff.
That is true.
And chances are presets are good, so there it is. That goes to that sameness as well. It's like, great, here's Repro by Yuhi, and it's preset so-and-so, right? And you hear that again and again. Nothing against Yuhi. I actually love their stuff. But it's just the point that when you start hearing things again and again. Right. So now you can really, really kind of break through that with doing it. And you might be creating something really new. Again, I'm reminded of like John Lord. I wonder what that discussion was like when went through like in Marshall the first time, just a distorted Hammond.
This is my sound. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, and it was like everything louder than everyone else, right?
Right.
So those are really, really cool. Obviously, the drawback of this as well is obviously if you have the opportunity, it comes down to one of practicality as well, right? If you're recording in your bedroom, like a lot of people are, you're probably not going to mic up a Leslie there,
Probably not, no.
But you might have to deal with the emulation. But if you have the possibility, hey, have some fun. Take a day or two and just mess around, try to get some cool keyboard sounds.
Well, here's one little experimental thing you could try. You could tape a paper towel tube on the end of an SM57 and point that at the amplifier and hear what that does to the sound. I guarantee it's going to make you go, what the fuck?
You did that one time with the guitar.
I've done it multiple times for various things. I have.
Right. And toilet paper tubes come in handy. I just recently heard an interview with, what's the guy from Collective Soul, the singer? Is it
Ed Roland? Yeah.
Right. I think he was on Beato, and he was talking about how when he was recording the first album, there's da 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 da. Yeah, that's him singing through a toilet roll thing, just to kind of get the vocal, because I guess he didn't have a whole lot of gear to kind of be different. So that's kind of neat.
And there you go.
There you go. Absolutely. What about all these virtual instruments, though? Would you ever consider like miking a virtual instrument?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same concept as reamping a guitar. Why wouldn't you do it? Or why wouldn't you try it at least? I have done it. You run the signal out of your audio interface. Generally, I would go DI to keep the signal very controlled, so to speak, into the amplifier from the keyboard that's coming out of your audio interface. Mic up the amp and then bring it back in through another input. The biggest thing you have to worry about when doing this is generally you're probably coming out in stereo, so you've got to have extra outs away from your monitor outputs on your interface, and then you have to have extra inputs on your interface as well. Otherwise, you're shit out of luck if you run out and you don't have extra inputs to come back in.
Right.
The other thing you do have to consider when you're doing that, though, is the round trip value of what I would consider a delay of the signal, because there is time that it takes that it goes out the interface through the amp, back in the microphone, and back into your interface. The smarter guys, if they're really fine-tuned to the actual feel of the vibe and everything else, and they're not time correcting everything, you're going to want to figure out maybe internally bouncing the signal to see where it should be in the time frame, and then you take the mic'd signal and you would either use something like Eventide's Precision Time Align, or maybe you use the I/O plugin in Logic, which will also account for the round trip value of what's happening. But either way, you're going to want to realign the audio after it's recorded if you need it to be exactly where it was in the virtual world, as well as in the analog world that you've just recorded it from.
Sure. Yeah, another alternative to that would be, it's a little bit less of a budget-friendly thing, but if you have a keyboard player, or if indeed you're the keyboard player, and you can run your rig off of a laptop, and
you could play it out one computer and
into another one.
Right.
That would be something to experiment. That would be the easier way to do it. Of course, then you're not dealing with a latency and stuff in the same manner.
Sure.
But then you got to have an extra laptop laying around. So.
Or some other type of rig for your virtual instruments. The other thing that I would note about doing that is be very aware of your volume levels, your gain staging, so to speak, so that you're not doing something that is overly quiet or overly damn loud kind of thing.
I mean, I would say especially going into the amp if you're doing it that way, right? So you want to make sure that you got a healthy level, or you're just blowing the input on the amp, which again,
could be part of the experimentation, but generally speaking, it's not generally what you want.
Right. I'd say it's the whole thing here it comes down to experimentation. If we're trying to create something new, there certainly is a lot on the table, shall we say, for using these techniques.
All right. With that, let's move on to our Friday finds. Chris, what have you got this week?
Well, today I'm going to sound like an old man yelling at clouds. I know that, but this needs to be said because I have noticed a trend, and I'm purposely not mentioning any names here because I don't want to draw attention to anybody in particular, where I see a lot of ads that are selling discount software. And it isn't discount software, it's cracked software. Because if you can see something where you have an amazing piece of software like Omnisphere or something, and I think Omnisphere is usually what, almost like $500. It's up there, it's expensive, something like that. But if you see it, oh, now it's in discounted price for $40. It's not legitimate stuff. It's cracked software. And I know I'm sounding old here. Just don't do it. Please don't buy it. You're shooting yourself in the foot besides bad karma. And all the software that's available today, even the stuff that just comes with your DAW, is really good. And the prices that we have for so much stuff today, it's not worth dealing with cracked software. And it's just the right thing to do. So stay away from that. Now I'll shut up and let you have the sound there for a little bit. But yeah, just stay away from it, please.
All right. I hear you. For me this week, I'm going to highlight Apple Music. And the reason why is I just jumped ship from using Spotify for a good number of years, actually close to 8 years of using Spotify. I've just made it now to Apple Music in the past week and a half, and have been pleasantly surprised in terms of a few things. One, there is a service out there that allows you to shift your playlists from one source to another source. It's pretty in depth with how many different musical streaming services it works with and how well it works. In all of the playlists that I took from my Spotify playlists and putting them into my Apple Music playlist, I think it messed up maybe 6 songs across 20 playlists. So
That's
it
not
was
bad.
pretty damn accurate. And it was easy to fix those 6 songs because it wasn't many.
What's that service that you used?
SoundIIz.com is the playlisting shifting thing that is absolutely amazing. As far as Apple Music is concerned, the sound quality immediately is substantially better. The other thing,
Really?
yes,
You noticed that
I can actually tell a difference, especially on the studio speakers. In headphones, it's noticeable, and certainly going through AirPods, it's kind of noticeable. It's not substantial. And the main reason for that is because you're usually working through some sort of Bluetooth conversion. That being said, the better your source material, the better the conversion is as well.
Sure.
But when it is straight up in the studio from the Apple Music software to the studio monitors, it is a noticeable difference in how much better it sounds. Topping that off is that they already allow you to do a lossless audio rate, which Spotify doesn't have. And they have Atmos mixes. It is fun to listen to that stuff. And the way Apple Music has designed doing it, you can play the Atmos mix. The stereo mix that goes with that release has to line up within a couple of frames on the time code as they do it in Atmos with the Atmos version. That way you can switch back and forth. If the Atmos version is sounding weird on whatever setup you have, you can switch it right over and turn that off and it will be playing the stereo version immediately, which is also cool. There's other things that make it better, but that I like better than Spotify. The only thing is that the discovery of music, I'm still getting used to it. It's different in terms of how it works on Spotify and how it works on Apple Music. I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. It's just different. And I'm still getting used to that portion. And the better thing is that Apple Music has not raised their prices like Spotify just did, which is nice. And they pay artists better, which I think is more appreciative to the audience that is creating this stuff that you listen to.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on our email list in order to be eligible for future giveaways, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this incredible podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the word keys, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page, and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll talk to you later, Joe.